Okay, I have 7:05, so I think we'll get started. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening for our May 2023 Evening Education Connection. We have Caitlin McKenney from PA's TechOWL joining us this evening. So Caitlin, I will hand it over to you and thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. I'm really excited to be here. As a little introduction for anyone who's not familiar with TechOWL, we are the State Assistive Technology Act program. So we've got a cool lending library where you can, borrow switch adapted toys and stuff. We also do tech for more serious purposes and access needs. And along with being an ATP at TechOWL, I also serve as the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator for the wider Institute on Disabilities, which is, where TechOWL is housed. So that means I'm actively involved in statewide and like Southeast regional task forces for disaster response, for disability integration assistance to organizations like the Red Cross, to county and city emergency management offices. So I get to do a lot of that sort of training and adaptation work on a regular basis. So I was telling Teresa earlier, I'm really excited to kind of be able to flip that and talk about things from the other angle and what we can all do as individuals and as families to prepare for emergencies and disasters. So I'm very excited to be here with you tonight. And feel free to ask questions or put questions in the chat as we go along. I will definitely leave time for questions at the end as well, but if something comes up that's not clear, just let me know. So first I wanted to highlight sorry, I thought someone had a question. Okay, first I wanted to highlight kind of what sort of disasters and emergencies we should expect to be responding to here in Pennsylvania. And so the top 3 priorities for our planning purposes are house fires, hurricanes and flooding, and winter storms and power outages. We do get other things happening, those kind of rare one-off things like chemical spills in the Delaware River. Or we get earthquake and tornado warnings. Like those things are possible in our region, but they're not a priority for our planning, according to, these zonage that the Red Cross has put together. And ultimately, the plans that we put in place can kind of cross all these categories and will be helpful for no matter what the response is. The one of these is not like the others. So one of these is kind of almost within our control. And I just wanted to kind of give my little fire safety PSA before we move on to talking about other preparedness and, go bags and evacuation needs and all that kind of things, because house fire prevention is somewhat within our control. And I know that growing up, I was very much given the impression by my mother that house fires were caused by unattended candles. If you walked out of the room when a candle was lit, then your house is going to burn down. So I wanted to kind of identify the major causes of fires. 3 of those major causes are unattended stovetops, improper use of space heaters, and unmaintained appliances. So your candles are not the biggest threat. I'm not saying leave the house with your candles running, but there are lots of other things in your house that could be a fire safety hazard. And I bet all of us could identify at least one of these things. A flammable material somewhere in your house within 2 feet of a heating element. Maybe that's the paper towel rack next to the stove on the kitchen counter. And inappropriate use of an electric cord. We are so guilty about this at our office. And I know in the schools and the classrooms I've worked in the past too, daisy chain extension cords or like outlets where you've got those multipliers plugged in. So you've overloaded the electrical circuit. And then a smoke alarm that either hasn't been tested within the past 6 months or hasn't been replaced within the past 10 years. Obviously, if you have one that runs on 9-volt batteries, you need to change those batteries twice a year. But if you have one that has one of the newer 10-year batteries in it, that should still be replaced every 10 years and tested every 6 months. So that's my PSA, and I will get off my soapbox. But if you do need any assistance with that, the Greater Pennsylvania chapter of the Red Cross is currently offering free smoke detectors, including accessible smoke detectors. If there's anyone in your home who is deaf or hard of hearing, they have strobe lights and also bed shaker alarms available. So if you either need that sort of assistance, or if you just need someone to come in and help you physically test your alarms because you can't reach them, they are offering that service right now completely for free. And that's across Pennsylvania, actually, not just in the Philadelphia area. So getting alerts about these different kinds of emergencies. The first step to knowing how we're going to respond is knowing that something is happening. So 2 ways to do that are to download a national app, such as the FEMA app or the Red Cross emergency app, or to sign up for your county's local emergency alert system. And I would recommend doing both because the FEMA and the Red Cross apps are going to give you weather alerts, but they're also going to help you with preparedness actions and help you with recovery. So they can help you do things like find where your local shelter is opening, because those aren't actually identified ahead of time. Your county has a plan of which buildings it could use for a shelter, but it's not like because you live in a certain neighborhood, you're always going to be going to XYZ school if a shelter need happens. So having that kind of mobile app interface to tell you where to go can be helpful. And then the county emergency alert system can provide more local information, like in that contaminated water scare, or if there was an air concern. I know my texts from Philadelphia are always coming through saying that a junkyard somewhere is on fire and the air quality is hazardous. Those little things that FEMA or the Red Cross aren't going to know about. And there's also a third app if you have a long commute, if you're working in a different part of the state and weather conditions or road conditions might change along your route. The 501 app is really helpful for that. One nice thing about the FEMA and the Red Cross apps as well is that you can track multiple locations on them. So if you want to get alerts for your home, but also maybe have a family member, maybe a parent who lives either in a different part of the state or different part of the country altogether, you can also monitor the weather alerts and advisories for their area as well, which I find very helpful. Alerts kind of come into 3 main categories. So the W's often get confused. Watch means there's something that's likely to develop. We're not sure if it's going to be in your area, or we're not sure of what time it's going to happen, but you should be looking at your plans so that you know what to do if conditions develop. So warning is kind of the highest level. Warning means it's time to take action. The hazard is occurring or the hazard is imminent, as well as that hazard poses a significant threat either to life or to property. That's what the warning is. And then somewhere in between those is an advisory. I don't think advisories are technically to the same level as a warning because it doesn't have that imminent threat criteria to it. But it is more than a watch because something has indeed been observed as occurring. So when you get one of these alerts, you know that there's either something likely to happen or something currently happening, whether it's a winter storm watch, a tornado warning, a severe thunderstorm watch. There are some basic disaster supplies that are going to kind of universally prepare you, no matter what the reason is for your evacuation or for your sheltering in place. We generally have 2 categories of disaster supplies. We've got the go bag, which is something that is personal to you. So things that other people aren't going to have if you join up with other people at a shelter or go to a family member's house or go to a hotel. Those people might have spare food, spare water, that kind of stuff, but they're not going to have your medications. They're not going to have your important documents. They're not going to have the things you need for your assistive technology. So the go bag, I really stress, is being important to have those personal items that are kind of not irreplaceable necessarily, but in the short term, not easy to replace. Whereas the 72-hour kit could be used again, either in an evacuation or for sheltering in place at home. But those contain the things that you'll need for basic survival over the next 3 days. So water, non-perishable food, first aid supplies. And we're going to kind of look at just a more in-depth checklist of what that might look like. This is just a sample picture of some of those supplies. And I'll go over some of the other parts of this document later as well for anyone who's interested in it. This is just one example of a template you could use to make your emergency plans. You can see the supply list and important documents are on page 6 and 7. So I'm going to skip over this for now. We will come back to this because I know a lot of you have kiddos who have, complex medical and communication needs and would want to be documenting that. But basic supply list. So first aid kit, medications, pet supplies, all those normal things, but some things that we wanted to be sure to highlight on our supply list from TechOWL specifically was making sure that you have extras of any adaptive tools that you need in your day-to-day life. So if you use sensory tools like headphones, if you have communication supports, if you have a wheelchair with pneumatic tires, bring in a tire patch kit and an air pump. If you have a communication device or power mobility equipment, having the chargers for all of those things and having software backups for those things, so that if there's water damage or something like that to your communication device, you have your vocabulary files stored somewhere so that you'll be able to get the instant equivalent access once you have a loaner device or a replacement device. And then along with those, you might want copies of the manual or copies of any warranties that are applicable to those items. And that kind of goes along with important documents. Copies of those things could be both left in a safe place given to a family member, and also I'd recommend keeping them digitally too, because it's really easy to store all these things either on a thumb drive or send them up into the cloud in a password protected folder so that you'll be able to access them no matter where you are. And it could also be helpful to have photos of those items. If there are specific types of positioning equipment, for instance, that you or your child needs, being able to replicate that will be a lot easier if you have a picture of here's what it was, here's the position that she needs to be in. Then we'll be able to find something suitable for the short-term use to replace that. We do have some phone numbers here as well for after disaster and other organizations that can help. But let me go back to our example picture here so you can see first aid kit, lantern, a hand-operated radio, lots of power cords, charging banks, identification, snacks. This person has one of my favorite first aid kit items, the chemical activated cold compresses. So if you are someone who has difficulty regulating your own temperature, I have those cold compresses in my purse, in my car, in my desk at work. But they also make the same thing for heat, those like snap hand warmers. So you can have both of those on hand. And it's really, really pretty easy to affordably start to put together these things one piece at a time. So I know it can be intimidating to look at this pile of stuff and look at this list and think, how am I going to either find the time to organize all that or honestly find the money to buy all these things. So what I usually recommend is add one thing to your shopping list each week. Buy one spare thing each week. And then within, a couple months, you're going to have found that it really adds up. The most difficult thing to get extra of course, is going to be prescription medication. So it is recommended that you have, a bottle a week's worth of your prescription medication in your emergency kit. Now, I know that in many cases, you aren't going to be able to get extra of some medicines. So if you can't have extra, and if your doctor is not able to write, for instance, like a travel prescription for a spare, then what I recommend is just rotating it out. I'm really lucky in that I don't have any small children in my household, so I can literally just store my medications in my go bag. And then I use a 2-week pill organizer for my day-to-day medication dispensing. And the original containers are stored permanently in my go bag. So that's where they live. That's where I know they'll be, and I won't have to worry about getting them. But if there's anything that you can't store in your go bag, particularly if you have kids and you don't want kids or pets to get access to those things, then I recommend just keeping a card on the outside of the go bag, making a note of anything that you need to add to it on your way out the door. And this could be for items that are too big to fit in the bag, or items that you don't have multiple of. Say you only have one charger for your wheelchair, you can't get a spare. Maybe you can put a picture of what that charger looks like on the outside of the go bag, so that anyone in your house who's helping you get out the door will be able to immediately visually identify this needs to come with us. Along with those kind of traditional things that are, universally recommended, and assistive technologies, also thinking about any sensory needs. Some of these are more school-based suggestions. I don't know what your fire alarms look like or sound like at home. Maybe you don't need headphones or ear defenders for that, because you can get out of the building pretty quickly compared to, standing at school when the fire alarm just keeps going on. But things that could still be really helpful is a copy of a social story, or a maybe visual schedule or first then card, or something to explain what's happening in an emergency. Items that could be comforting, bringing handheld fidgets, a weighted lap pad, a stuffed animal, some other comfort object. In school-based settings, we also unfortunately have to teach about lockdowns and all those drills where the goal is not evacuation, but to shelter in place and stay quiet. So for those situations, I also think of what can help individuals cope with that, and not only cope with it, but make that a meaningful learning experience for them alongside their peers. So all just different sensory tools to consider, and some pictures of some items that some other kids have chosen to go in their bags before. We've got a lot of jewelry, chewable jewelry. I had one young lady whose emergency evacuation plan in her IEP includes a kit with, I want to say it was 6, maybe 5, a specific number of rolls of Smarties, though. They did the math as to how many rolls of Smarties she needed. And that is written into her individual emergency evacuation plan attached to her IEP. And I loved that very much. Different styles of ear protection if you have a kiddo with sensory sensitivities. A lot of people are really into the active noise canceling headphones lately, which are fabulous. I love them for things like laundry machines, or plane noise, or those other repetitive background noises. That's what the active noise canceling is canceling. It's what it's counteracting. But really trying kind of something more manual for situations like this, where the noises are going to be really loud and really unexpected. I think you're usually better off with those over-the-ear defenders or earmuffs or something like that, if your kiddo can tolerate those. And another really important thing to consider in our kits is having some form of identification. So your students may be able to get, an official PA non-driver's license if they're old enough. You may want to put a picture on their own homemade piece of identification if they don't have that. Something that indicates what sort of limitations or access needs they might have, how to best communicate with them, and who to contact if they need help. There are lots of different places that make wearable jewelry for this purpose as well. There's ifineedhelp.org, which has a wide variety of different formats. They've got bracelets, they've got necklaces, they've got tags you can attach to your zipper or your backpack. They've got seatbelt covers. This picture on the bottom left there, the shoelace tag, is from If I Need Help. And the really cool thing about all of their items is that they have a QR code built in. So that gives you access to real-time information updates. So if someone is missing medication that day, or is injured in some way, or there's some sort of time-sensitive need that's not usual for them, that's something new, you can update their profile right to the minute to indicate that new information, or to tell someone where to find you. So you could say, you know, we lost Caitlin at the mall, please help her come back to the food court. Someone named Teresa is waiting for her. And that can be really helpful as well. The bottom right corner here is a silicone wristband from Road ID. It's what I personally use for my medical ID bracelet. They are recognizable as medical ID. You can get them with, you know, like the little red universal symbol there. But what I like about them is that they don't have kind of the upcharge of medical specific jewelry. And they're also very, very sturdy, highly customizable, and it's a great way to immediately indicate that there's some sort of medical need. Even if you can't fit everything you want to say onto the bracelet, just having an indicator that the first responders should look for more information. And I also wanted to mention that almost all of the EMTs who I have spoken to have said that the wrist is, for them, the fastest, most easily spottable location to wear a medical alert piece of jewelry. So if you can tolerate having something on your wrist, maybe consider that as plan A, or necklaces are also pretty reliable. But basically the more elaborate you get, the more it blends into your outfit, the more kind of customized you get, the less likely it is that they're going to immediately see it and recognize it as a medical ID. While this won't fit in your Go kit for sure, another piece of tech that might be needed for your evacuation plans could be a Stair-Travel device. So the blue on the bottom left there is an EvacuTrack chair, and the green one on the right is one from Stryker. They're both tread style chairs. This design is one that's kind of recommended by the Engineering Society for its ability to be, you know, used quickly, used with a single operator. It's more efficient maneuvering of turns and landings compared to the other styles of chairs, which ultimately makes for a faster speed of travel. So you're getting out of the building and out of danger faster. There are other options. There are sled type chairs or carry chairs. Some of them need 2 people. Some of them will allow you to stay flat on your back though, if that's a medical need. No matter what style you choose, you should have at least 2 people, or at least twice the number of people trained in it as is needed. So if you have one in your house or in your apartment building, making sure that multiple people in your family are trained on how to use it. Maybe seeing if a neighbor would be willing to come learn how to use it so that they can assist you in an emergency if needed. That's also a really good way to bring up the subject with a landlord if you're renting an apartment. Knowing that it's actually recommended by the Rehabilitation and Engineering Society of North America that all multi-level housing facilities should have some sort of stair descent device for emergencies, because even if you don't know of someone in your building who needs that, there could be a injury that happens during the course of the emergency. So there could be a respiratory limitation or a cardiac or a sensory impairment that someone didn't realize was going to make it difficult for them to evacuate. Or there could be something that actively just happened. Maybe they just, broke their leg during the earthquake or whatever. So there could be multiple multiple people taking advantage of this in any public building or in any housing facility. And that is one way to maybe broach the subject with landlords or neighbors to see if they would be willing to support you in getting this and in learning how to use it. Disability-related power needs. So if you know that you use life-sustaining medical equipment, you should make sure your power company is aware of that. I have not found any data on whether or not they do anything with that information, unfortunately. I know they say they do. They say they have a list and that they will prioritize those families as they're turning the power back on. I don't want to sit here and tell you that for sure. I wouldn't rely on that, but it doesn't hurt to put yourself on the list and to say, yes, please prioritize us when turning the power back on. And that also includes if you need power for refrigeration purposes or for climate control purposes, if you have difficulty regulating temperature, for mobility purposes, all of those needs are valid. So we don't want to rely on that and depend on that as 100%, but definitely worth telling the utility company about it. And then you prepare yourself with low-tech backups. So if you generally use a power wheelchair, having a manual transport chair as a backup. If you generally use a high-tech communication device, having maybe printouts of that. So just literally take a screenshot of different pages of that device and print them out and laminate them, or print them out and cover them with clear packing tape. And then leave a little note with it of how your child would be able to use that. How do they indicate, yes, that one, if you're sitting there and pointing to the options for them? Could they smile, raise their hand, make a noise? What is it they're doing to help identify if they aren't able to physically touch those communication pages? And then if you have medication or formulas that need to be refrigerated, manual ice chest coolers can be surprisingly efficient. Those can keep things cold for days. Even if you can't afford to get a fancy one, just anything you can do to add a little bit of insulation to a standard cooler. Usually they're insulated on the bottom and on all sides, but not on the lid. So, putting some styrofoam or adding a second layer under the lid of your cooler makes a huge difference in the cooling efficiency of that. I did include a link here to our self-study module on one of our TechOWL websites, aacommunity.net. We have a brief page about backing up your AAC. What it's basically going to tell you is to go to the company's tech support page and search the words backup or vocabulary export. And then that company is going to give you directions. Usually you're going right into the settings page of the app. You're going into vocab and then clicking export. And you either email yourself the file, upload it to the cloud, to Dropbox, or if you're using a device that has a user account associated with it, like if you've got a Smartbox device or something like that, you can log into your account from the device and then save it that way. And then those files will be there for you in the future. Backup power sources. A lot of the times I get questions from families with medical needs about generators. And definitely it's a personal decision about what you have the resources and the capacity for, but I just like to make sure people know the wide range of solutions that are available for backup power, because generators are a lot of work. Generators require routine maintenance. Generators require proper ventilation. Generators have to cool off in between being refilled. So that's a period of time when the generator can't be in use because it's cooling off so you can refill it. So just kind of thinking about the logistics of that and whether that really fits your need, whether that's the best solution for your environment. Some other options, USB power banks. That could be enough to, power your smartphone, your tablets. There are high capacity battery banks with lithium-ion batteries. Goal Zero makes a really robust line of these. Everything from like the $200 one up to like they have one that can basically power an entire circuit of your house now. You can run your full refrigerator on it. So kind of, deciding what it is you need. You can look at how much wattage the equipment that you rely on a regular basis requires in order to run, and then make, an educated decision based on that. And if it doesn't say how much wattage it requires, it probably says how much voltage and how many amps, and you can either manually do the math on that, or if you're like me, you just type into Google power calculator and it will do that for you. So just choosing a backup source that meets that threshold, that meets whatever level of wattage you need, but that also you're going to realistically be able to maintain. So other options would be a portable power inverter. So something that connects to your car, you run your car, and then it's, converting AC to DC current to run the appliances or other things you've got plugged into it, which again needs adequate ventilation. You've got your car running, that needs to be outside and away from where you're breathing. Possibility of theft. Some of them are prohibited by local ordinances. If you got a homeowners association or something, some of those outdoor generators are not allowed. And then, of course, the option of a whole house generator that you would have professionally installed by an electrician. I've heard some horror stories about people plugging generators into their homes, like central electric circuit, and then power lines being worked on. The power line workers didn't expect there to be any, electric current through those circuits. And I don't know if it's true or not, but either way, I think if you're going to have a whole house generator, you should go ahead and let an electrician do it. On the subject of generators also, there are some solar powered quote generators out there, which are really just battery banks, and those are awesome. It's a little portable solar panel that you could put out to recharge this battery that you can then use to charge other things. Most residential solar panels that we use for day-to-day energy do not actually directly charge your house. They kind of feed back into the power grid. So those aren't as helpful when the power goes out, but those portable solar battery packs can be really helpful. And some ways to fund these things. Sometimes we have luck asking for them to be included with the original device. So if you're ordering, a communication device asking for an extra battery, or if you're ordering a wheelchair, asking for an extra battery, sometimes we have luck with that. Sometimes that's denied. So other possibilities, there might be funding through a Medicaid waiver. You might decide to pay for it through, if you have a flexible spending account through your healthcare provider, if you have an ABLE account, or definitely there are payment plans through different places, either from the company themselves or PATF, the Pennsylvania Assistive Technology Foundation, has definitely done zero interest loans for people for generators in the past. So there are some options if you do decide that you need one of those higher cost solutions. And then for batteries, just making sure that you're storing those effectively, otherwise they won't be there when you need them. So using humidity-proof containers, storing those upright. If you're storing any equipment with the battery, separate the two. So if you have, for instance, a wheelchair that you don't use on a regular basis, take the battery out of it before you store it. And ideally, connect that to a trickle charger or a battery maintainer so that it will be ready when you need it. Any questions so far? Oh, thank you, Laura. All right. So because Pennsylvania is a Commonwealth, we do this really neat thing where every municipality has control over how they run public services. So that means there's no single integrated solution for things like notifying your first responders that you might need extra assistance in an emergency. So the lovely, lovely people at the Assert Autism Collaborative have made a list of contact information for the Emergency Services Department in every county. And some of those counties has noted if they have a specific disability or medical need registry. I know the idea of a disability registry is a controversial one, and maybe not what you're into for every purpose. But for the purpose of emergency response, I would encourage you to consider it and to, consider talking to your local fire, police, or EMS station to ask them, do you have a system, or how would you prefer to be made aware of, medical needs in a household? Because even if they don't have a formal system, even if the police don't have anything, the fire department usually does. And it's important to know that the police and the fire department, they don't talk to each other. They can't access each other's registries or each other's maps. So if you want just the fire department to have it, fantastic, great, only they have it. But they do have, their dispatch center has some sort of mapping software. They are able to flag your house in some way to say, this person will need help evacuating. Or, if we get call at this address, then we should expect XYZ, communication or medical need. So fire departments are a pretty good bet in terms of being able to flag your address and being able to have your information available for response. If you would like to notify your local police or EMS station, it's going to vary pretty widely. Some counties have electronic record keepings, and some people have paper record keeping. And there is a PA premise alert form that the state troopers are still actively giving out. And I have to at some point tell them that that website is down. I don't, someone has got to break it to those guys. But yeah, state troopers were still, as of last month, actively handing out this form to people. While the form itself is not being supported in any formal way, it is still a really useful, just easy way to know what information your police would be interested in having. So I do have a link to the form, to a form hosted off on another county site since their site's down, and feel free to utilize that just as a way of starting the conversation with your local departments and making sure that they have the kind of information that they would be interested in. Montgomery County does, fingers crossed, have access to Smart 911 soon. And we are in the process of kind of negotiating and trying to talk about bringing it in as a 5-county Southeast region so that everyone will have access to it. And Smart 911 is a system where if you were to call 911 from your phone number, your profile that you have put whatever information you are comfortable within will show up for the call center, for the police, for the first responders. So any information that you want them to be able to see will be there. And then also, at the same time, complementary, there is an emergency needs registry. So the emergency needs registry would be visible to people in disaster contexts, and your personal profile would be visible only if you call 911. So those are 2 different layers of control and decision-making power you have there, which I really appreciate. The downfall is that Smart 911 is only available in select areas. And if you go somewhere else in the country that is subscribed to Smart 911, then they will have access to your profile. But if you step over a county line into a county that does not have that, then it won't help you at all. So sometimes you have to kind of mix and match these solutions. The only thing that is true across the Commonwealth is the Yellow Dot program. So thank you to the Department of Transportation for that. So this is a decal that lets first responders know that if you're in a vehicle accident, someone in the car has medical needs. You don't need to put any information on the sticker. It's not going to, identify anyone as having a disability specifically. It's just anything that could help in what they call that golden hour, that first hour of response time after an accident. But I have found this a really helpful way to include communication details, emergency contact details, anything that might make interacting with your child more successful. Because what they're going to do is they're going to mail you this little yellow pamphlet, and it's got space for you to put a photo and space for you to write allergies, emergency contacts, and then a kind of blank box about medical conditions in which you could put anything you wanted. So this goes in your glove box, the sticker goes on your rear window, and the sticker being there just lets people know, hey, look in the glove box for more information, which I think is a great method to all information sharing, in that you need something visible right away just to tell them to look further. And again, you can get that, that kit completely free, either from the website or by calling them. Other ways to share information and share your plans. So the template that I mentioned earlier is available on our website, techowl.org/eprep. And the idea for this particular template was one that it was easy to use. So we have one template called the My Emergency Readiness Plan, which I can show you also. Let's see. Oops, that's not the right one. There we go. So you've got a couple different planning tools here. I recommend, for ease of access, the Be Ready tool that we had just looked at earlier. And that's going to give you the need to know information about how to communicate with your child, what their limitations, important people, interests, conversational topics to make them at ease, favorite TV shows. If they were to be admitted to the hospital without you, what's going to, help people be able to interact with them and make them comfortable. It's also going to lead you through identifying what your access needs and accommodation needs in an emergency are. So the other option is the My Emergency Readiness Plan. This is a much longer booklet with much more written material. And then the Individual Emergency and Lockdown Plan, which is our template specifically for schools. If you have a child who's in a public school, I find this is most important then. Obviously, if you have a child at HMS, then they are pretty well versed in what your child's needs are. The other thing I want to highlight on here is our picture communication boards. We have a video about how to use those on our YouTube channel. So if you were to make a backup of your child's specific communication vocabulary, you could use those same techniques, those same kind of partner-assisted scanning, yes/no communication techniques to navigate that grid of your own personal vocabulary, as well as our emergency communication board. So I have my contact information here in case anyone who's watching this after watching the recording, or any of you who are here tonight have questions, or if you have advocacy requests for me to bring back to those statewide and regional task force for disability integration and disaster response, reach out to me. I would be absolutely thrilled to do that. My email, caitlin.mckenny@temple.edu, is the very best way to get in touch with me. But if phone is more accessible for you, that's completely fine. And my phone line is 215-204-5974. So I will take any questions people have. Let me open the chat as well to make sure I didn't miss anything. While you're all thinking of your questions, also I do have a feedback form, whether you are attending live again or watching the recording. Please consider taking a moment to respond to that as well, because that helps us as an organization to both document the impact of our work and to also plan future educational opportunities. So it is, completely anonymous. Feel free to give anonymous feedback or topic requests. But again, if you have specific questions and want a response, then the best way is to email us.
Well, Caitlin, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this evening. And I do see one in the chat. Hold on.
Oh, yes. I never thought about the need for a medical bracelet to stand out as a medical bracelet. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it too until, I asked someone, hey, are necklaces or bracelets better? And the EMT's response was, well, bracelets are marginally better, but ultimately it just needs to be labeled as a medical ID. Valid, okay.
Do we have any other questions? No. Well, we will make sure that Caitlin's contact information, in addition to being available on her last slide, is also available in the email with this recording that will be sent out in this week's family newsletter. And again, Caitlin, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this evening. We really appreciate it. And this was a wonderful presentation and resource that we, as Laura mentioned, hope to put some things into place at HMS School as well.
Wonderful, yeah. And you guys feel free to be in touch with anything you want support with at the school. And again, I always love coming to visit with you guys. So thank you very much for having me. And thank you everyone for being here with us tonight.
Have a great evening, everyone.